Welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for our webinar about careers in measurement, evaluation and learning, or MEL for short. One of the most common things we get asked as evaluators at Clear Horizon is, how do I forge a career in measurement, evaluation and learning? So today we're bringing together 3 practitioners at various stages of their MEL journey. They've all had and started their careers in very different fields with very different skill sets, and they're going to share how they've gone about crafting their career in MEL. But before we dive into that, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that I'm joining you from, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. They've cared for the land I call home for over 60,000 years, and much of my early career was dedicated to sustainability, and I'd like to acknowledge that we have so much to learn about how to live in harmony with nature from traditional owners. It's for this reason and many, many others that I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So my face will probably be quite familiar to a few of you, but for those who I haven't met or you haven't joined a course with us in the past, my name's Cam Elliott and I'm the head of the Academy at Clear Horizon. And Clear Horizon is one of Asia Pacific's largest evaluation consultancies. We're based here in Melbourne, and we're all about using our super nerdy MEL skills to support people to create positive impact in the world. And our Academy is all about taking those MEL skills that we've developed over those 15 years and translating them into really practical and applicable courses that you can take and get ready and apply those skills on the ground as soon as you need them. We deliver these courses in a range of different topics. The biggest course we do is measurement, evaluation and learning. We also do courses in theory of change, most significant change, developmental evaluation, as well as data visualization and reporting. So there really is something for everyone in our course offerings. Some really quick housekeeping before we jump into things. This will be familiar for those of you who've joined the webinar, so apologies if you want to tune out and go do a bit of work while I do the spiel, but it's important for those who haven't joined us that you know how we run things. In a moment, we're going to kick off with a few questions that have come through to us via the registration forms that you sent through. Thanks to everyone who put your great questions in there. So I'll throw some of those out to our panelists and we'll hear from them, their responses to those questions. And then we'll open up to new questions that come through the Q&A box. So down the bottom of your screen, you should see a little Q&A box. If you click on that, you can then type in the question that you'd like our panelists to respond to. Before you type it in, have a look and see if there's any questions in there that look similar or the same as the question you'd like to ask. If that's the case, just upload it. And what we'll do is at the end, when we come to open up to questions from the audience, we'll go with the questions that are most asked for, most uploaded, sorry. So yeah, if you can follow that process, that'd be great. You'll also see a chat box like you normally see in Zoom, and that's the place you can chat with other participants. You can ask questions of the panelists, like, can you slow down, or could you explain that in a different way? It's more your way of interacting with the panelists rather than asking formal questions, which you use the Q&A box for. So yes, definitely encourage you to jump into the chat box and get active. Finally, we are recording this session, as you'll see up in the top left-hand corner. The reason for that is we'll be sharing the link out with everyone who's registered, and we definitely encourage you to send the link to anyone else you think might be interested in this particular topic. So with all the formalities now out of the way, it's my absolute pleasure today to introduce our panelists. Joining me today, you can already see Jess Dart up on the screen there. We've got Victoria Pilbeam and also Dru de Livera. Thanks so much, guys, for joining me. Really appreciate having you here today. I'll do a quick intro for each of you. So starting with you, Vic. Vic joins us as a conservation monitoring and evaluation specialist from WWF Australia. And prior to joining WWF, Vic was a senior consultant here at Clear Horizon. And it's so great to have you back, Vic.
Great to be back, Cam.
I'd love to, maybe outside of this session, find out a bit about how things are going over there. We might find a bit about that through this session as well. Dru de Livera also joins us with a background in digital strategy and design. And at Clear Horizon, Dru is our product development lead, where he represents some of the changes, the big changes that we're seeing in our sector as digital transformation gathers speed and rolls through the industry. Great to have you. Thanks so much for joining us, Dru.
Thank you, Cam.
And finally, but definitely not least, we have Jess Dart. And Jess is our founding director at Clear Horizon, also an AES fellow and award-winning evaluator. Jess is also the co-creator of many of the courses that we offer at Clear Horizon Academy. Welcome back, Jess. All right, so we'll jump into a quick little icebreaker to help us to get to know each of you. So first up, might start with you, Dru. Perhaps you can tell us a bit about what you wanted to be when you were growing up.
Yeah, sure. I went through a range of different career choices. The big one that I spent a lot of time on was becoming an architect. I used to build little houses with bristles. There was a time I wanted to be a car designer, and a brief few months where I wanted to be a graffiti artist after I discovered who Banksy was. My parents were very supportive. They allowed me to paint the back, the wall in the back garden. It was a good time. But I've since moved on from those dreams.
That's fantastic. I had no idea about that little brief interlude with graffiti artists. That's great. How about you, Vic? What was what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think the first job that I wanted to do, I actually wanted to be a plumber. And for really mercenary reasons, like they make really good money, and I thought I could get a nice watch out of it. So even though I'm like not that great with my hands, not technically suited to it at all, I thought that would be a good fit. And then after that, when I got a little bit older, I wanted to be a zookeeper, or like a David Attenborough type and travel the world looking at individual baby seals. So I guess it's, you see how that inspiration runs true, but also has changed a little bit.
Definitely. The sector or the space that you're working in is the same. Maybe the application of your skills is slightly different. Cool. And finally, Jess, how about you? What did you want to be when you were growing up?
Well, when I was growing up, I used to tell people that I was going to be a fish farmer. And I think I just wanted to shut people up. I was a little bit of a bit of a stubborn little girl, and I didn't like being asked. So I thought that would silence people because it was unusual. But I do remember going to a fish farm and being pretty interested in the whole setup. And that sort of flowed through. I think later I wanted to be a marine biologist. So, I wanted to, and I did actually sort of study that at uni, believe it or not. So I think I wanted to be something to do with water and nature. But of course that moved on. But I did actually do my degree in biology and did freshwater biology, marine biology and botany. So I continued it through, but I'm not there now.
No, but a bit of overlap there with Victoria's.
Yeah. And I want to be an architect. So I think we're all connected, because I have this idea that like I can just build a framework of the measurement and everybody else can do the rest of the work. This is my fantasy. Yeah.
Plenty of time to retrain, Jess. All right. So our first question then from the audience: what brought you to the world of measurement, evaluation, and learning, and what made you decide to stay? We might start with you, Jess.
Yes, a bit of a windy path, and not very deliberate. I think probably we'll find that as a pattern. I know not many people go, I want to be an evaluator when I grow up. So I started as I said, my degree in botany, and then I did a master's degree in sustainable agriculture, which had systems in it, and it was sort of organic, low input agriculture, and it was with a focus on developing countries. So it had I studied international development, and then I flowed into that to start to work in international development, but working with marginalized communities, working on sort of systems, farming systems, because I was still in the natural resource environment space, and learning about participatory methods. And that's really what I got excited about. I wanted to work with participatory planning and participatory methods, and I wanted to do a PhD in that. But while I worked in India for a couple of years, and Mexico with sustainable farmers, and I was working sort of doing research or farming systems research, which is a little bit similar to evaluation, really. And this is where my life changed, because I was the only person actually posted in the job in India, and I was there for the only expat from DFID posted there. There were obviously lots of local staff there. And DFID said, that's the English aid program, because I'm English. They said, we have to do an evaluation. Who can do the evaluation? Oh, we don't know what Jess is doing. Stop doing what you're doing and do the evaluation. That was my baptism by fire. But I was in a remote part of India, in Western India, in Gujarat, and there was no internet because I'm old, okay? So there was no internet and no books on how to do it. So I had to make it up. And I think I've been pretty much making it up ever since. With some failure and some success, but I just applied what I knew in participatory planning and participatory methods, and I used that to try and do an evaluation. But that was my first attempt, and not many people seem to know a lot about it back then. And because I'd done that, and I had a PhD scholarship, when I came to Australia to do my PhD, everybody was like, "I should do it in evaluation." And I was like, I don't want to do it in evaluation. I want to do it in participatory methods. And they were like, no, everybody wants to know about evaluation. Nobody knows. This is, 25 years ago. And I eventually got persuaded to do my PhD in evaluation, but with the compromise that I would do it in participatory evaluation. And I was only the second person to do it in Australia. I think that was Patricia Rogers had done her PhD here in evaluation. She was my supervisor, and not many other people had. So it was pretty much greenfield at that point, and the rest is, that's probably enough. That I did my PhD in evaluation, founded Clear Horizon, I'll let everybody else go. Yeah.
Thanks, Jess. I'd love to hear from you, Vic.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. Yeah, I feel like from a very kind of young age, I was like, I want to work in the environment. It's so important. I love it. I see how connected it is to people and communities. So I was definitely kind of on that track. And so I did, sustainability at uni, just like you can. And I landed a gig doing bits and pieces of research work and tutoring, actually. I tutored sustainable development at ANU. And when I did my master's, all that jazz. But I think what drew me to evaluation was, I guess, this real frustration that people were putting so much effort into trying to fix these intractable environmental problems, but not really getting that much to show for it in a lot of ways. And I found out about evaluation as a thing that would let you work with people that you really admire, and to kind of create space for people to think critically about the work that they're doing and how we can make it better and have a bigger impact. So yeah, that was kind of the draw card, and I decided I wanted to do it, kind of. I had no way of finding employment in it, really. I didn't know anyone. And I very luckily kind of got doing a bit of consulting work for the Pacific community, actually, and then segued that into finding a full-time evaluation consulting gig with Clear Horizon, which was, pretty lucky. But yeah, kind of similar, sort of fell into it. I had a bit of research background, so I did spend a lot of time talking to people about fish, which I would say is a theme that has continued, as anyone that's worked with me can attest. But I think a lot of more things transferred than I would have thought, but it was definitely a happy accident.
I did not realize that fish would be such a strong theme in this conversation.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's 80% fish, 20% evaluation.
Yeah, and I'm noticing a couple of themes come up here as well, around kind of making it up as you go along, not really knowing that it was a career before you stumbled upon it, and not sure how to go about finding a role in it. And these are things that we hear as well from a lot of learners in the courses that we do, and particularly before they become learners with us. There's a lot of confusion and uncertainty about how you go through this career pathway. So why we're having the conversation, really. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you, Dru.
Yeah, unfortunately, no fish in my background, so I can't continue the theme, sadly. But mine is different in other ways as well, actually, because I started my career in the kind of the intersection between business and digital. So I worked in a startup accelerator after graduating from university. So I helped startups collect, analyze, and understand their data, and then use that data to grow. That role kind of transitioned into a role at a digital consultancy. where I used those same skills to again help much bigger corporations collect, understand, analyze that data, and then use that data to grow their new initiatives. But after doing that for a few years, I was hoping to make a move into social impact. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know what that could be. But then my previous boss at the time, she referred me to Clear Horizon. She said, this might be something that interests you. They essentially use a lot of data-driven processes to help maximize social impact. And that alone was fascinating and a huge draw card for me. So I spoke to Jen at Clear Horizon, who's the head of digital. And she gave me a rundown on MEL, and it was even better than I thought because there was this learning component to it as well. So it was designing systems that collect data and then essentially feed into iterative loops that make entire initiatives as effective and as efficient as it could be. So it kind of tapped into that data nerd of that I've been, all of the work that I've been doing previously, but connected and kind of gave me a pathway to use that in the social impact space. So I jumped in as a digital and data consultant, and then we quickly realized there were opportunities to develop digital products in the MEL space, and so I've moved into that role now, which has been a really great experience.
Thanks, Dru. It's great to have a slightly divergent person in here in terms of the role that you hold currently, and also your pathway into that. I had no idea that you had worked in accelerators before, so that's cool. I might be giving you a call after this to get some advice. All right, so next question. What, if any, skills were transferable from your past career to your current career in MEL? And I might start with you, Vic.
Yeah, I think something that was definitely transferable are kind of core research skills in terms of designing studies, but like more so just the philosophy around it. Like, I think a lot of MEL is really kind of asking questions and actually being curious about what the answers are and what that means in a bigger picture. And I think research gives you a lot of skills in kind of how to approach that. And I think also an emphasis on applied research in particular. So when you're working on specific projects and you have outputs that you need to deliver, you kind of have to balance that abstraction with like having a concrete view on what you need to do. And I think that's really key to doing good MEL practice. And I think the other thing was, I'd done a bunch of facilitation with kind of like youth NGOs. I took some time off to do some teaching work with high school students, and I worked at university. So I felt pretty comfortable like coaching and facilitating with groups. And I think that made it a lot easier to kind of segue in, because so much of it is really helping people to be at their best and to work problems out for themselves, rather than like having an empty vessel and then pouring into that the content. Yeah,
it's great that you mentioned coaching there, and that idea of you're not there to give them answers, you're there to support them and guide them through the process of finding the answers for themselves. So it's partly capacity building in your role as an evaluator.
Yeah, I'd say I think that everyone does evaluative thinking all the time. Like whenever you pick a restaurant, you look at some Google reviews, or you have a conversation where you weigh up different options. I think it's a really natural thing. And I compare it to, it's the difference between like breathing, which is what we do all the time, and like yogic breathing. You're just heightening certain parts of it. You're not like teaching something to people that they don't already know in some ways.
You've already got a bit of a scaffold there and you're just building on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. Love that. How about you, Dru? What skills were transferable across to your new career?
Quite a lot of the skills I had learned through the startup accelerator and then the digital strategy consulting were transferable. I think the core set of kind of structured problem solving was key and definitely hugely transferable. into the MEL space, but also the experience that I had in building those systems to kind of collect, analyze, understand data was also hugely transferable in building digital MEL systems for our clients, but also these digital MEL tools in trying to understand the best way to set it up so that we get the most use of the data that we possibly can. Those were hugely transferable. And then I think a lot of the soft skills that come from the consulting space, so client management, managing expectations, presentation skills as well, pitching ideas, all of those were hugely transferable. And it's been nice to see just how seamless that transition was. Obviously, there was a lot of learning I had to do in the MEL space with what MEL is and how it works. But I guess the backbone of consulting and those digital skills just moved through very, very easily.
I've also heard you mention, I can't remember when it was, but that there's a similarity between Agile and MEL in terms of the value that it brings, or the approach in general.
Yeah, for sure. That again was one of the big draw cards for me to move into this MEL space. I loved that MEL was essentially a form of agile development in the social impact space. It allowed you to, have structured sets of time periods where you look back, you reflected, you understood what you did well, what you could do better, where what you need to do next, and then you use those learnings to improve what you're doing. And that was awesome. I'd never seen that before in the social impact space. I didn't even know about it. So all of those skills transferred quite seamlessly across, which was a pleasant surprise.
Thanks, Dru. And how about you, Jess? What skills were transferable from your career?
Yeah, I was reflecting actually on Victoria's comment, and the bit she didn't tell you is that she's very good at charming people. I remember working with Victoria in some really tricky places, and she just charmed everybody, and we had these really successful experiences. And that is so true, is that the way we work, we're really engaging with people, and sometimes large groups, and people's skills are right up there, and facilitation skills. And I just have to point out your snake charming abilities, Victoria. I remember that. You know which workshop I'm talking about. And yes, so a lot. In fact, I often think that evaluation, or the sort of evaluation we do, which is sort of learning oriented and participatory evaluation, is asking for a lot. It's actually asking for a lot of different skills, and so most people can actually draw from their history because it's quite holistic, because what we're looking for is critical thinking combined with people skills. That's the sweet spot. And so you might have encountered, you'll hear us all talking about that, but specifically for me, you can see how my career flowed right into it, because participatory planning is what I learned first before evaluations. That required facilitation skills and planning skills and workshop skills and analytical skills. So I used all of that. Systems thinking, so I studied system thinking because it's ecology and systems thinking, and now I use that all the time, systems thinking, to think about how change happens and how you evaluate it. But power, and how you work with people, and people with different levels of power. So I, originally worked in developing countries, and I worked with marginalized people and small scale farmers, and we looked at power, and we thought about power, and that's becoming really, really big in the work here in Australia, and working with lived experience and elevating the voice of people who are marginalized, and thinking about different voices and how you level them up. And I guess right through to the data. So we use stories at a very basic level, stories and numbers, both. So you need to carry both with them. Of course, you can have more of a bent of one. In Clear Horizon, we have people who are much more across the quant than the qual, but we all work together in teams. So you need to really have a bit of appreciation of both and how they work together. And so I started my career off in science, and very much came from a number orientation, and did, did a lot of stats. People will be surprised about that because they think of me as a story person today, but I didn't start there. I started with, lots of botany. I did lots of experiments, lots of crunching, using lots of analysis of variance. That's what I kept doing a lot of. And then when I did my PhD, I crossed over to social science, and I had to learn all about constructs and people and philosophy and the meaning of life. And I think that all comes into it as well. Evaluation is the discipline, or social impact measurement is the discipline that keeps giving. I can tell you, after 30 years of studying it with a PhD in it, still learning about it, never stops giving. It's quite big and wide. So if you're a curious person and you are up for a challenge, it's a fantastic career. Never stops.
That's great. Thanks, Jess. And I do know that we have a few people participating in this who are further down their career pathway. And I think a lot of what you said there would resonate. It's constantly an opportunity to constantly learn and grow into the role. So many of the people that registered were interested in what a typical day in the life of a MEL practitioner might look like. Interested to hear from each of you, maybe starting with Vic. What does the day look like for you?
Crikey. It's very varied, which is, I think, an answer which doesn't say much, but I'm an internal evaluation specialist. So there's only a few of us internally that work on evaluation as our full-time thing. So a lot of my day is finding different ways of supporting our program managers with all kinds of different things. Like, you could facilitate a reflection on scorecards, like policy scorecards for advocacy purposes. And then you're in a meeting talking about data systems, and then it's document storage. And then you've got your own evaluation project and you've got to write a terms of reference. So it's very varied. And I think it kind of reflects the organization that you work for, to be honest, what a day in the life is like.
But it sounds like, I mean, not to jump ahead and anticipate what Jess and Dru are going to say, but it sounds like that's pretty standard, that varied nature, even as a consultant, maybe particularly as a consultant. Every day looks different.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge pull factor as well. Like, if you you never get bored, because every day is
change.
Yeah.
Great. How about you, Jess? What does the day look like for you? Ooh, you're on mute.
It's a little hard because I'm in a funny role, because I do evaluation work, but also run a team, so I'm doing a lot of team working with teams and doing, but I think over career, just generally, when I'm the thing is varied. Yeah. So especially if you're in consultancy, if you're thinking about a career in evaluation with a consultancy company, that the high and the low of it is that you really get to look in just incredible diversity of stuff. I bounce around from the aid program to the environmental program, right into the heart of social things such as place-based planning and social innovation and domestic violence and inclusive education, and I just move around in all the sectors. And if you're easily bored and you like diversity and you're a little bit curious, it's amazing. It's like never stops giving. However, it's fast paced. So it's leveled off with not everybody enjoys the pace of that and the constant change and the cognitive, it can be quite cognitive overload. I love a challenge. So for me, it works with the way my brain is. I'm a little bit, my brain, I've discovered I'm not completely neurotypical. Maybe that's something to say, is that you can be you can have quite an unusual brain and work really well in this space, which is really nice, isn't it? That it takes all sorts. But yes, very varied is what the number one feature, and lots of new things, because even if you know your evaluation inside out, you're evaluating different contexts, different outcomes, different places, and working with different people all the time. So huge variety and hugely interesting.
And that neurodivergent point, Jess, might be a good little segue into a question someone's asked up here. Does everyone have to be as articulate and charming as Victoria to be a great evaluator? Wow. I'd like to know about different roles for different thinkers.
Setting up a little fan club through this session. We love to see it. And I made Jess laugh, so I'm already crushing it. I think it's like an ecosystem, right? Like, there's a niche for everyone. If you love reading things and looking at spreadsheets, then you're going to have a good time. If you're a people person, you're going to have a good time. If you just are critical and curious, there's always different roles. And I think that's a big mistake that I started off making. I thought you had to be one thing to be a good evaluator. I thought you had to be like a real buttoned up kind of older white guy type. It's not really the mold that I can easily fit. I think there's roles for everyone. And
yeah, and we often work in
sport.
teams. Yeah, it's a team sport. So, you know, people have different skills. Often you'll have some people who are more qualitative than quant. So some people will work more with interviews and stories, and then other people get into the spreadsheets. They love a pivot table, and you know they get right into it. And so they come with slightly different personality trends. You know, the data people tend to be a little bit more introverted, and the qual people tend to be a little bit more extrovert. Not always, but you do see that. It doesn't really make any difference whether you're introverted or extroverted, I don't think. And yes, we do have people who are much more confident in facilitation. And if that's not your wicket, you just pair up with somebody who is, and you know, you can lead the data analysis, and they can lead the process. And so teamwork is absolutely, there are quite a lot of roles, but that would require a slightly bigger company, because people who start off on their own career, like it's lone wolf evaluators, which there are a lot of. So you run your own, you know, you run your own consultancy, you have to be a bit of everything then. But if you work in teams, then you can play a niche.
Definitely. And sorry, Dru, I cut you out there. I didn't give you a chance to answer that question. What does a typical day in the life of an evaluator look like for you, or a non-evaluator, I should say?
Yeah, for sure. And again, I think that theme of varied work flows through here as well. And what's been really nice in my role is that I've been able to combine all of these new colleagues that I've met through the MEL space with my old colleagues and the kind of people I used to work with in the digital space. So my day could involve talking to a UX designer, technical development lead, you know, coders, developers, graphic designers on the one end, but then on the other end, I'm also talking to consultants to understand what they want. I'm also talking to clients to understand what kind of digital projects they want to dream up and what kind of you know, new steps they're taking towards building their digital capabilities. So even though it's a technical role, it's still very much focused. There's a human-centered essence of the digital work that we do here, which means there's a lot of time in front of people if you want there to be. Because as Jess mentioned, you know, some of the developers, for example, who we work with, they're very much, you know, give me the work that I need to do and I will go and do it, and they do an excellent job. And we've set the team up to play to people's strengths, which is, you know, great. But yeah, very varied. And I've said this quite a few times, both at the company and outside of it. One of the best things about working in this space is just being able to get up in the morning and say, I'm going to work on projects that's going to make the world a slightly better place today. And that's just a really nice feeling to have when you get up in the morning.
Absolutely, definitely. And I think it sounds like a common theme is the ability, regardless of what role you're playing, it's the ability to collaborate with others. It's pretty central. I imagine finding someone who has all of these skills in one thing is pretty darn rare. It does exist, and I guess they tend to be the most successful in independent consulting, maybe, or starting a company. But yeah, it's the collaborators that tend to be the most common. So we've got a few questions coming through, which is great. Might check to this one. What's one thing you know now that you wish you'd known at the start of your work in the field? Might start with you, Jess.
For me, yeah. I was reflecting on this. I'm thinking about it. I mean, I think it's been a fantastic journey. I have had the most incredible career. So there's not a lot of change. I feel like the most lucky person in the world, really, that I've had something to keep me entertained and completely intrigued for 30 years. It's been incredible. That's what it's like for me. It's like I find other things dull compared to my work, which I have to manage, which is hard. I love my job so much because I get to go all over the place and just, you know, be useful, and it's just amazing. But one thing, if I could talk to my younger self, I don't know, because I was really into stats as a 20-year-old and quite good at it. I was actually got my best grades in stats, which seems really strange now. And I totally let it go because I got totally entranced by social inquiry and qualitative data, and I learned all about using constructivist approaches and all these really amazing, and I just sort of fell in love with it. And I really went deep into qualitative methods and participatory methods. And I just stopped using the stats. And I'm like, why did I keep that up? For God's sake, I was really good. And now I'm so rusty. And I just wished, because now I need them again, of course, because numbers are really pretty big in the world right now. And I just wish I had kept it up, kept it both up. I don't know how I could have done that, but I wish I could. Yeah, wish I had. So I'm going to have to go back to school a bit, I think.
How about you, Vic?
Oh, there's a lot of things. I think I'm definitely one of those people that really stews on things. I think most of the time when I've wished that I've done something differently in MEL, it's in relation to taking enough time to understand what the problem is before I start working on the solution. I've definitely had a couple of times where I have kind of rushed in because I really want to get it done or solve the problem, but I haven't really given enough time to breathe and to work out what's going on. I think that's kind of an ongoing journey. Yeah.
Common across all disciplines, I think. You have a tendency to just jump in and dive in. And sorry, Dru, I seem to have left you to last a few times. How about you?
That's right. I think with me just being entirely new to MEL, what I would have liked to have known at the start was just how flexible the MEL strategies can be. I think coming from, again, a technical background, a lot of the frameworks I've worked with in the past are quite structured and don't really give you a lot of movement either way. But MEL has a lot of power in that flexibility, in that it allows it to be tailored to all sorts of needs across all sorts of sectors, which is really cool. But it was definitely something new to me, coming from a technical kind of more fixed idea of frameworks in my previous roles. So that's something that I would have, I think, benefited from learning right from the get-go. But it's been really nice to kind of learn how frameworks, the MEL framework, can be flexible and cater to clients' needs. So that's been great.
Thanks, Dru. And we'll stick with you for a sec. What trends are we seeing now in this field that we didn't see maybe 5 years ago?
I think I'm the trend that you're seeing that you didn't see 5 years ago. Just seeing this embrace of digital has been really cool. And I think, especially for someone like me, who's a digital consultant coming into a space where there hasn't been much digital shakeup, it's just such an exciting time. You know, the world is your oyster. There's so many technologies that we can bring in, from everything from, you know, just cloud-based data analyzing processes to machine learning, which is something that I'm particularly interested in. And just building the tools, the digital user-centric tools for MEL practitioners. I think those are all huge trends that we'll be seeing in the years to come. And I think especially for someone who works in digital, it's rare to come into a space, you know, that hasn't been shaken up by digital. So I'm really looking forward to all of that.
You got in on the ground floor, Dru.
I did.
That's great. Jess, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, digital is so big. So, I mean, we live in this world, the internet of everything, don't we? And, you know, evaluation and social impact measurement is about data. So we were never going to get away with it. I think it's amazing that we, the field managed for so long without being digital, really. Like, you know, a lot of the evaluation frameworks I've built and the social impact measurement frameworks I built were on paper, and then I made a tool on paper. Like, how did we get away with that for so long? Well, we're not getting away with it anymore. So that's one. But the second trend is sort of related in a funny sort of way, is there's this big rise in design thinking and like user and co-design and human-centered design, but that is about putting the user right at the center of what you're doing. And then with that comes elevating voice and working with people with lived experience and bringing them in to design and bringing them into evaluation. And so that's really big. And with it, all of it is shifting. My work has shifted from coming in at the end of a program and being asked to evaluate it right through to coming even before a program is funded, to working at the front end, to thinking, bringing evaluation skills and critical thinking and these sorts of ways of working right at the beginning with things like developmental evaluation and working with the digital solutions as well. And thinking about the user. So it's also, I feel like the three things, working at the front in design, working on digital, and like the role of the putting the people at the center of it all, are all sort of interconnected in some sort of weird way, and they're part of the new world that we're in.
Great, thanks, Jess. How about you, Vic? What trends?
I think it's a bit of, my point would kind of be a bit of a smush of both, to be honest. I think on the one hand, we have this big digital revolution. We have these data and these tools that are enabling us to be more transparent and do things that we couldn't do before. And like what Jess's experience of doing a MEL framework on paper is what our experience of doing a MEL framework like in Excel documents and Word documents today is going to be for 5 years from now. And then the other thing I think around like the designification of programming and of elevating lived experience and having novel approaches or making more space for really well-worn approaches to evaluation that are developed from different cultures and contexts and lived experience. And I think those two things coming together is going to be a transformational force in evaluation, because I think the current status quo really intensifies the power that comes with evaluation in a couple of select kind of circles, and data really has a power to democratize and to make that much stronger. And I think there's also increasingly like a call for transparency from like we see it at WWF with our supporters, with our donors, with our partners around what we're doing and the impact that we're having. So I think it's only going to keep growing and becoming more and more of a thing.
And then with that is the rise of the impact organization, isn't it? That's another trend, is that like Dru, people want to know that they're making a little bit of difference every day. And so there's a desire, especially this new generation, especially after the reflections we've done during the lockdown, there's a desire for many people to know that they're actually making a difference in their job. And people are leaving jobs to go somewhere where they can make a difference. And that's where evaluation helps, because it can help surface what that difference is and connect staff to it. It's really interesting. This, I actually think it's quite an interesting time right now. Well, when you put all that together, that is, as you say, Victoria, it's quite transformational. It's an exciting time, but I would say if you, it's also a time that people could get left behind because some of the older, big, fat, thick evaluation reports at the end of a program, I think they're beginning to lose currency.
Yeah. I think the age of reports that are over 50 pages is dead. Over 30 pages is dead. It's the placemat, and then it's like 20 pages of different figures.
Yeah, and it's got to be visual. Yeah.
Yeah. If no one's reading the report, then there's no point to the report.
Amen to that. That's great. And it kind of, Jess, your point about the rise of impact is a thing that people, you know, in their personal lives are passionate about contributing to, feeds quite well into the next question I had around social impact measurement and how that differs from evaluation. What's the overlaps and the differences?
Do you want me to try that one? Or do you want
Sure.
It's funny because there's a lot of overlap, and people have been talking about this a lot lately. Social impact measurement, evaluation. People don't like I think one difference is that people are liking the term social impact more than they like the term evaluation. Evaluation has this sense of being evaluated and being, you know, audited, or people are almost frightened of it. So I would support the change in terminology towards social impact measurement. There's a lot of similarity across the two. I guess some of the social impact measurement, it might be a slightly newer field. It's a little bit more NGOs are going that way, whereas governments are still in the talking evaluation. And a lot of not-for-profits are talking social impact measurement, and a lot of philanthropy is talking social impact measurement. So there is so much overlap, and I think different people are defining them differently. We're sort of moving more. Clear Horizon is moving more into social impact measurement. Sort of makes sense to us, but we still use evaluation roots, if you like, the rigor of it. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. I actually think it's quite a hard question to answer, but I would say don't forget about the environment. It's one problem with the term social impact measurement is it doesn't include the environment. So I don't know, we probably need a new term Maybe that's why we go
no.
with MEL, measurement, evaluation, and learning, because it includes. That's why we don't. That's why we're a bit nervous about using social impact measurement, because we think the planet. We have to think about the planet. You know, we can't just think about the people. What do you reckon to that, Victoria?
Yeah, I think spot on. We talk a lot about impact measurement kind of for that reason, but I do think, yeah, it's kind of an image problem for evaluation as much as anything. The way people are moving to impact measurement, it's yeah,
image problem, yeah.
A rebadge rather than a redevelopment, potentially.
Yeah, rebranding. We got lots of questions that have come through. So up the top one, most upvoted, is how to navigate the challenges of working on areas or projects that you don't have any content knowledge in. So say you don't know about fish, but you're suddenly finding yourself on the Great Barrier Reef project like Dru. What do you do?
I'll go first. I mean, this is the love of this field. I walk into stuff that I don't know about a lot. I enjoy it, actually. So what you do sometimes need to do a bit of reading to get the basics and not make a fool of yourself. And if you have a generalizable knowledge, that's better than none. But the beauty is that if you don't have any knowledge, you're much more neutral, and that is something people value. So you don't get caught up in the details. You can hold the process for other people. And that is a real advantage because you're quite neutral. So actually, it's a blessing to not know too much about the politics and the history, but you need to pay attention to it. And of course, you know, this stuff, you're consulting with people, you're listening to people, you're reading stuff. So I love having an empty glass and, like, you know, pour it all in, pour what everybody's said, read everything. You have to be, it helps to be a fast reader, read it all, try and understand what's going on, and then you're holding a mirror back up to other people and they go, oh wow, how did you manage to do that? But it's because you're not lost in the details. So it's actually part of the work is to you know, you're not going in as an expert and you're not coming out as an expert either. Remember that one. You just sort of your process. It's a process, really. You're bringing in the pieces together and holding the mirror up and engaging people and making sense of that. So you're not playing an expert role. Maybe you're holding process. That's why you can do it without having the content. Yeah.
It reminds me, or it's similar to great football coaches who've never really played soccer before, but they're fantastic coaches. So it's not a requirement that you know the game. You don't have to know the subject matter to play your role well.
But counterpoint, it helps. It helps. If you've ever, I've definitely had experiences where you walk into a room, you've got a program team that looks very skeptical. If they start talking about granular questions about how to map river flows and stuff, if you at least understand what's happening, you're going to have a much better time. And especially, I think if you're doing work with communities that have had a rough trot, I think you don't want to come in empty, and it's kind of part of your responsibility to get up to speed or to have people with you there who are really switched on and understand what's happening so that you can do a good job. So I think you have to, there is definitely a balance, and some sectors are a bit more open-ended than others, but it really helps to have a content area that you know a bit more about. But otherwise, I think it's just like passion, and people just want to know that you care about the work that they do, that they don't necessarily expect you to know everything about, I don't have to know, like, I don't have to be a veterinarian and understand the ins and outs of wildlife treatment to do a good job supporting my colleague. I just have to listen to her and know that
there is important. A minimum, isn't there, that you can sort of you can show up and say the really wrong thing, especially if you're trying to be an expert. So I guess it's two things for me is, one, do your homework, talk to people, do some consultation before you rock up, make sure you know what the key things are, but also don't pretend to be an expert. That's not good either. Yeah, we have to accept our role is not to be experts.
And maybe going back to what you said before about partnering and collaborating, it's about making sure the experts are in the room, and your skill is to draw out that knowledge as needed. Go for it, Dru.
Yeah, I found that clients really appreciate that sense of curiosity. They see it as you being genuinely interested in their work. And so whenever I start a project, I usually ask my client if there are materials that I can read up on to have a better understanding of what they're doing. And they always appreciate that. It just shows that you're genuinely invested in the project. And as Jess said, I think the worst thing you can do is pretend to be an expert when you're not, because you will be caught out. and that's just not a good look. And you don't have to, you don't have to do that. That curiosity, that sense of wanting to learn is appreciated by clients.
Great, thanks, Dru. All right, next question comes from Yihan. I'm a recent graduate who'd like to work in the MEL space and drive localization and participation. Do you have any suggestions for emerging practitioners like me on how to develop skills related to MEL and eventually start a career in the MEL space, given the fact many consultancy and evaluation organizations prefer experienced people? Great question.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll chip in as an employer. Well, doing the MEL course, I mean, that's an obvious one, learn the skills, but that's only one part of it. So it's when we recruit, we do recruit sort of consultant is the lowest level we recruit. Project management skills. Actually, you can come through a project management route as well. We don't actually necessarily look for people who have experience in MEL. We look for the attributes that that they need to do the work, and a real eagerness for learning. In fact, we really drive our interviews to check that people are continual learners, that they want to learn, that they show up, they're curious, that they can analyze data, that they're confident. Those sorts of skills are really important. Minimum, I noticed there was another question about minimum quals. You need a degree. You don't really need a master's degree. Having those the analytical skills and facilitation skills useful. If you want to work for a consultancy company, not everybody loves consultancy, not everybody does well at consultancy because it's a fast pace. So if you've cut your teeth at any consultancy, that goes a long way. You can do internships is a great way to experience whether you like consultancy. I'm telling you now, it's like you never know who's gonna thrive in a consultancy environment and who isn't. But internal is different. You don't have to be a consultant to do evaluation. Of course, you can do internal roles, and there's a massive demand for internal roles right now. So I think you pretty much get a job without having the experience if you show that you've got the right competencies, you've got some research background, and that you're making an effort to learn. I think there's quite a big market at the moment. Would you say so, Victoria?
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of keep an eye on these things, and the market for internal roles is huge. Like you see the same roles being re-advertised because they just can't fill them. So I think if you're a grad and you're interested in it, you're in a good space. I hope and pray for a day where it's a bit more open as a field, and where it's easier for people to get into, because really a lot of it is kind of like an apprenticeship. You learn on the job. So actually, I think if you wanted to be an evaluator and you're really passionate about localization, I would find a small organization that you're passionate about and volunteer with them. If you know any evaluators, ask them for a little bit of advice and a little bit of guidance, and just have a go at it. Like maybe it won't be perfect, but you could still do a great, get some experience. And once you've done one project, you're already ahead of like 80% of the people that apply for MEL jobs without having actually had a chance to try it out necessarily.
And we've got to remember there is a master's degree in evaluation, which looks good, and you can do a capstone project as part of that, which means you get some experience. So doing a master's in evaluation, if you feel that's one way through, and then making sure you do your capstone in a company that does evaluations, whether it's internal or external, you'll get your runs on the board. So that's one way of getting in. And I know a lot of people at Clear Horizon came through that route. The degrees that we recruit from, we have like 3 pathways that we recruit from. There's the Fenner School, because is it integrated studies, that degree? Is that you, Victoria?
Interdisciplinary studies.
Interdisciplinary studies, because it's systems thinking, qual and quant. It's a great background. That's a degree that we recruit from. We get a lot of people from international development who studied a bit of evaluation through that and want to work domestically or want to work internationally. And then the third one is sort of policy studies. I think, is that the RMIT one? There's one other degree that we seem to get a lot of people from, policy sort of studies. And and none of them come with evaluation. They come with the graduates who have some basic qual and quant, and who understand systems and complexity at a level. That's quite good. Yeah. Hopefully that's helpful.
That's great.
Internships are great way of getting experience. This is, as Victoria says, it's a practical skill. You can do a master's degree and not really know how to do it, unfortunately. So getting your hands there, having a crack at it, having a go, is really where you begin to learn.
And the other thing to note is that several consultants that we've hired in the past have come through the MEL course. So they've come through the course, they've learnt the ropes, and then at the end asked whether there were roles available and have ended up landing those roles. So it's an interesting pathway to develop your career there too. So next question, we've probably got time just for this one, unfortunately. Sharon says, I feel this could be the career for me after 30 years of doing all sorts of things. However, I'm wondering, number one, is this a career where maturity is appreciated? And two, are there many opportunities in the private sector?
Yeah, there are opportunities. I think immaturity can be appreciated, yeah, but it can, I'd say yes, but there's a little bit of a but there, is you have to be comfortable with technology, because it's going quite techie at the moment. Like, I'm trying to keep up. I'm 55, so there are plenty of people who are older than me in this space. There's a bit of a need to keep up with some, which we were not digital natives. I guess older people are not digital natives, so that's a downside. But absolutely, there's a space for people with experience, because that's the beauty of having age on your side, is that you've seen you know how things work, you know how government policy works, you know how organizations work, so you can bring a huge amount in. And so absolutely can step into it as you're older.
There's one last question. I'd love to jump to that if that's all right, because I think this is quite strong for other people in the room. I'm an academic research, but love the participatory nature, systems perspective, and social impact of MEL. Do you have any suggestions about how to move into MEL from academic research? Are there any things I should do to make myself more competitive to an organisation like Clear Horizon?
That's a good one.
I think there is a great niche if you're an academic researcher to do MEL. I think increasingly, like, lots of universities are starting up their own kind of offshoots that do MEL work, and you can segue through that pretty easily if you want to try your hand at consulting or project-based work. And also, like, you can kind of tailor research projects, get a bit of funding on the table to do it, that basically do MEL and that give you that hands-on experience of doing projects that are in that vein. But I see heaps of people kind of making that little jump over. It's pretty close. Yeah.
That's great.
I would just add in project management skills. If we look at somebody who comes from academia, the first thing we'll go is, do they know how to manage a project? I mean, because the thing about, especially if it's consultancy, is you got to hit your timelines, and you got to manage deadlines, and you got to manage expectations, and you don't have the same luxury that exists in academia, and that can be a bit of a culture shock. So we've had people come from a research background who haven't done well because of that. So that's something to be aware of, whether you're willing to go down that front, because it means you have to do your best work always when you've got this much time. It's like an 80% thing. You have to just do it and get it out onto the next thing. And you have to listen to your clients and really try and meet their needs, although, as well, which is another thing that the beauty of academia is sometimes you have more independence. So there's some differences in culture. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you both for those differing perspectives. That's really handy, I'm sure, for Kylie there. All right, well, that's all the time we have, unfortunately. Thank you so much, Jess, Vic, and Dru. Great conversation. I really enjoyed it. Hopefully it was useful for the people listening. I'm sure it was. Yeah, we'll hopefully see some of you, if not all of you, back for another webinar down the road. And thanks again to all of our participants. You will have seen up in the chat, we dropped in a discount code that you can use to access any of our courses, 15% off. And there's a whole bunch that are available to join next year. So have a look at the link that Lee's dropped in there. And see you at a webinar down the road, hopefully.